You know what's wild? Every Kenyan government, and I mean every single one, has survived what should have been its death blow. Kenyatta survived land questions. Moi survived the clamor for multiparty democracy. Kibaki, a contested election that killed 1,300 people. Uhuru, he survived the ICC. And Ruto is currently surviving, well, everything. We keep asking the wrong question. How do they get away with it? When we should be, how do they convince us that getting away with it was always inevitable? Because here's the thing. And here's the thing about conspiracies in Kenya. They're not meant to hide the truth. They are meant to make you feel powerless once you know it. Let me walk you through the playbook. It's the same every time, just with different actors. Something happens, something big, your Finance Bill 2024, your Chicken Gate, your Eurobond, your Golden Bag, your Anglo leasing, NYS. Pick your scandal. The government fasts move? They don't. Not really. They do something much, much smarter. They create a process around it. We are setting up a committee. We are launching an investigation. We are bringing in international auditors. And here's where it gets beautiful. And for them and not us. That committee is not meant to solve anything. It's meant to create the appearance of an accountability while the actual machinery of power continues to be untouched. In 2015, we had the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission. You remember? You remember what came out of that? 4 shillings spent to document injustices going far back as 1963. 1963. That report named names. It detailed land theft, political assassinations, ethnic cleansing. And you know what happened to it? The government did. That's the verb they used, noted. It was like a fucking memo about a printer toner. Imagine, all they did was just noted it. But here's the conspiracy. The process itself was the point, not the gave us something to hope for, to wait for, to invest our energy in, and while we waited, the same people named in that report continued accumulating land, political power, and generational wealth. Step 2. We get to the good part. Once the committee has done its work or pretended to, information starts leaking. Pay close attention to that pattern, or to this pattern right here. The leak is never a surprise to the government. It's choreographed. It's timed. Remember the Panama Papers? When Kenyans were named in offshore accounts? The government's response wasn't to deny it. It was to say, those accounts, come on man, aren't illegal. Which technically is true, but it's also a masterclass in reframing. They shifted the question from, is this ethical? To, is this legal? And once you comes, guys, we've already lost. But here's the conspiracy within the conspiracy. Those leaks are strategic exhaustion tools. They give you just enough truth to make you feel informed, but never enough power. You know the politicians are stealing. You know the tenders are rigged. You know the Supreme Court is already compromised. You know and I know. And that knowing without corresponding power is the whole point, because knowledge without power doesn't create revolutions. It creates cynicism. Now, let's talk about the most of the machinery, the illusion of choice. Every Kenyan election cycle, we are sold a narrative of existential choice. This is the most important election of our lifetime. The future of Kenya hangs in the balance. It is good versus hustler versus dynasty. And then, inevitably, after the chaos and the protests and the petitions and the bodies, they shake hands. The conspiracy here isn't that they've planned it from the beginning. It's that the system itself ensures that any opposition power must be absorbed into the establishment to survive. Look at the trajectory. Raila Odinga, the late, great Raila Odinga, from political prisoner to prime minister to elder statesman, endorsing the establishment multiple times. Martha Karua, from one constitutional defender to Raila's own running mate. Musalia Mudavadi, from opposition to Ruto's prime cabinet secretary. And don't even get me started on Moses Wetangula. From CORD directly to Kenya Kwanza. The pattern is clear. The system doesn't need to destroy opposition. It just needs, because eventually, and I mean eventually, every opposition figure faces a choice: remain pure and powerless, or compromise and access the table of meals. And once they are at that table, they're no longer your champion. They are stakeholders in the team's survival. Here is where it gets really insidious. The conspiracies aren't hidden. They're overwhelming. Corruption scandals, each one massive than the other. Golden Bag, 600 million. Anglo Leasing, 1 billion. Eurobond, $5 billion disputed. COVID funds, billions of shillings missing. And of recent Hustler Fund, 80% default rate. But where did the money actually go? Each scandal is big enough to top. When they stack them, when there are too many to process, each one of them audacious than the last, that's not incompetence, that's strategy. Because when everything, and get me right, when everything is a scandal, nothing is a scandal. When every week brings a new, last week's revelation becomes old news. The outrage cycle becomes a treadmill, and we are all just running on it, getting absolutely nowhere. The conspiracy is this: they've made the theft so massive, so systemic, so overwhelming that the prosecution, if they're ever going to become destabilizing. Because you see, you want to arrest the corrupt, you'd have to arrest half the government first. You'd also have to arrest all the judges. You'd also have to arrest corporate leaders. And don't forget that you'd have to arrest media owners. And to arrest each and every one of us, because we all know someone who's eaten from the system, who's gotten a tender they actually and truly shouldn't have, who've paid a bribe to even skip a queue at one of the government offices. The theft is so comprehensive, so largesse, that addressing it would require tearing down the entire structure. And they know it. And they know that we are not ready to do that. So we settle for changing the faces at the top while the foundation remains fish. Now we get to the philosophical core of the conspiracy, the ultimate mindfuck. The government doesn't need to convince you they're good. Let me say that again. The government doesn't need to convince you that they are good. They just need to convince you that your resistance is futile, that they are inevitable. Listen to how we talk about the government in Kenya. Serikali Joe ni serikali. My guy, hatuwezi shinda. What can we do? They have all the power. We are just trying to survive. At least a Somalia or a Sudan currently. That's not political analysis. That's learned helplessness. And it's been systematically cultivated through every failed protest, every rigged election, every unanswered petition, every commission that goes nowhere, government that betrays its base. Each failure doesn't just discourage us, it teaches us. And it teaches us that the government is stronger than our collective will, that power is more real than people, that the system is immortal, and we, as the people, are. Let me give you concrete examples of this machinery in action. Case 1, the Gen Z protests of 2024. The most leaderless, organic, digitally coordinated uprising in Kenyan history. No tribal calculations, no political patrons, just young people saying enough is enough. What happened? Phase 1, The government was genuinely scared, so they withdrew the finance bill. Phase 2, the government regrouped and started disappearing protesters. Phase 3, the government co-opted the movement and invited representatives for dialogue. We remember the number of times that we had X talks, where on X he called for us to join in and have conversations with him. Phase 4, government waited. And this is their masterstroke. They know that if they wait enough, they let the momentum die. So they just wait. It's okay, let them complain, let them wire, or let them talk as much as they can, let them complain and say whatever they want. Because the more they complain, the more they wait, our momentum dies. And phase 5, finally, the government is back to business as usual. Bad. Because if you think about the Gen Z products of 2024 and where we stand today, the government has gone back to its normal business. It's normal, just living. I had the opportunity of watching an episode, a debate that was held in Kenya by the BBC, and we had a member of parliament from Kisii, Osoro. And if you could see the arrogance that oozed off his mouth, because every word that he spoke was something to show that, guess what? You tried, you failed, and now the cycle has gone back to normal. He had no disregard. He had total disregard for any Kenyan that was in that auditorium asking pertinent questions about their survival. He didn't care. He even went ahead and made faces. But you see, the conspiracy isn't or wasn't the abductions. Those were real and horrifying. This conspiracy was the patience. They know Kenyan memory is short. That Kenyans do not remember. No, another scandal will come. They know we'll all get tired. Case study 2, the handshake of 2018. After the most contested election in Kenyan history, after NASA even refused to recognize Uhuru's presidency, after the late Raila was sworn in as people's president, they shook hands. Just imagine. And just like that, the opposition, as we knew it, completely collapsed. Not because they were defeated, but because they were absorbed. They were taken, though they were orphans. The conspiracy, both sides knew the game. Uhuru needed to neutralize Raila to pass the BBI, and Raila needed state protection from prosecution and a path to relevance. The people, as in you and I, the people that lined up to vote for Raila or for Uhuru, sadly were never part of the negotiations. Case study number 3, the Supreme Court 2017 to 2024. In 2017, the Supreme Court nullified a presidential election. First in Africa. First time in African history. We thought, my God, things are actually working. Then in 2022, the same court upheld an election with similar irregularities. Different judges, same institution, opposite outcomes. The conspiracy isn't that the court was bribed in 2022, though maybe they were. We'll never know. The conspiracy is itself can be wielded by whoever controls executive power, or those that are in the executive control all these independent institutions. The 2017 ruling wasn't proof that the system works. It was proof that occasionally the system, when it doesn't fundamentally threaten power. Okay, so if that's the machinery, what do we do then? Because I recently watched Dave Chappelle's stand-up on Netflix, and he had quite. And one of his points wasn't to just expose the game, it was to refuse to actually play it. And here's what they don't want you to know. The conspiracy only works if you and I believe in it. The government's power isn't in their guns or their money or even their institutions. ability to convince you and I that your power or our power doesn't exist. But here's the thing about manufactured helplessness. Truly, 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 it can be and should be unmanufactured. They rely on our short memory. So become every promise, every scandal, every contradiction, not to go viral, not for clout, but to build an undeniable historical record. That's why even this series exists. That's why we're documenting Ruto's. That's why documenting Ruto's lies isn't petty. It is resistance, because they can't gaslight a generation that keeps receipts. Secondly, stop waiting for a savior politician. And that is where I feel as though we as Kenyans are currently bogged. We keep waiting and asking, but who will become the savior? Who in the opposition can actually beat President Ruto? Who will be the guy that will take us from Canaan, in the proverbial words that the late Raila Amolo Odinga spoke? I want you to remember, will disappoint you, because the system requires their compromise. The real opposition isn't a person. It is a practice. It is civic engagement. It is refusal to normalize the abnormal. It is voting in every freaking election while knowing voting is enough. It's speaking up whenever you have the chance. It's being able to have these conversations with your kin, your friends, your enemies, any opportunity that you have. It's in the music that we sing, the poems that we hear or write. It is in us not accept to be silenced like they require for us to be. Thirdly, you need to build independent structures. They want you to be dependent on the state for everything, so that they can threaten you with withdrawal. So, build systems they can't control. Cooperatives, community organizations, independent media. Support your local podcaster, whoever speaks truth to power. Those are the guys that will deliver honest conversations in matters that are actually crucial to the society. And they will not be held ransom like media stations are held, using advertisement and government-sponsored contracts. The revolution won't come from Nairobi, sadly. It'll come from people who've already learned to survive without the government's. You know, I quietly thought about it. What would make Osoro that vile, that arrogant? What would make him feel so detached with the pain of the populace? To Osoro, he's in Nairobi. And Nairobi are not they're not his voters, sadly. So no matter how much complaints we raise, no matter how many issues we complain about, it will never affect him. The people who are going to vote for him are back in Kisii. But this is our chance. Like I've said, the revolution, the change would come from Nairobi, because they already expect the resistance from Nairobi. It will come from the inlands. It will come from Kisii, from Malaba. It will come from all our home places where people for too long, have been marginalized and have to think that they require to side with government to find roads, to get education, to get what is definitely. Fourth, let's embrace the long game. And this may be the hardest part. The government is playing a generational game, and we are playing a new cycle game. Every protest that fails isn't a failure. It's practice. It's building for the generation that will actually break the system. The Mau Mau didn't see independence. But my God, their children, even though they never got everything they required, their children actually did. Fifth, name the game. The conspiracy loses power clearly, when you stop being shocked by the theft and the lies and the betrayals, not because you've become cynical, but because you've become tactical. You can't shame people who have no shame. You can't appeal to a conscience of people who've replaced it with a calculator. You have to out them. Look, I want to be honest with you, and I want to be honest with you about something. When I started researching this episode, I got angry. That familiar Kenyan anger. The kind that makes you want to throw your phone across the room when you read the news. That kind that makes you want to scream when some politician is lying with a straight face. But then I realized something. That anger, that is exactly what they are counting on. Not because they are afraid of it, but because they know it sadly burns out. They know that the rage is exhausting. They know that you can't fury indefinitely. Eventually, you have to eat. Eventually, you have to take care of your family. You have to live. And while you're living, they're still governing. They're still stealing, still consolidating. So here's the thing that they don't teach you about resistance. It's not dramatic. Most of the time, it's not even visible. It's a teacher who stays after hours to tutor kids whose parents can't afford private lessons, even though the government hasn't paid her salary in freaking months. It's a doctor at Kenyatta National Hospital who refuses to turn away patients even when the supplies run out, like we saw a few weeks ago, because he knows the alternative is death. It's a community organizing a harambe because they've accepted the government won't fix their roads, but they refuse to that they have to live with a broken road. It's the journalist who keeps investigating even after the threats, even after the bribes, or even after watching colleagues get arrested. It is the student who stays in school despite the fees, despite the strikes, despite every system designed to push, because they know education is the one thing they can take with them that can't be taxed, can't be stolen, or can't be confiscated. And this is what the conspiracy tries to hide from you. That resistance isn't always revolutionary. Sometimes it's just resistance. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, that's not enough. We need a revolution. We need a system change. We need these people in jail. And you're right. We really do. But here's what I've learned documenting Kenya's history, studying, analyzing our patterns. Every revolution that succeeded was built on decades of people who just refused to quit. The Mau Mau didn't win independence in the forest. They won it in the consciousness they created. A consciousness that made continued colonial rule unattainable. Kenyatta didn't defeat the British in battle. He outlasted them. He made the cost of occupation too high, not in blood, but in legitimacy. The second liberation didn't happen because of one big protest. It happened because Kenyans in 1990, in 1991, in 1992, through beatings, through arrest, through assassinations, until Moi had to give in. He had to bend. You see, the government wants you to think in terms of battles, because battles be won or lost. They want you to see every protest as either a victory or a defeat. They want you to be so exhausted by the apparent futility of it all. But if we stopped thinking in terms of battles and of erosion, water doesn't defeat the rock through force. It defeats the rock through relentless, patient, consistent pressure. The rock looks invisible right up until the moment it actually isn't. Not your anger, your consistency. That's what keeps them awake every other night. I think about my parents' generation sometimes, the ones who lived through Moi. And I even had a chance to live through Moi, part chunk of my life. 24 years of that man, 24 years of Nyayo House, 24 years of queuing to vote, 24 years of political assassinations. And you know what's wild? They're the ones who tell me to calm down about Ruto. We've seen worse, they say. At least now you can criticize the president without disappearing. And they're not wrong. Things have changed. Not because the politicians got better, but because Kenyans refused to accept what their parents accepted. Each generation has a little further. So, when I say we have the power to bring political change, I don't mean next month or in the new year that is about to show in today, in the next few days. I don't mean after, or I don't even mean after the. I mean eventually, and I know eventually sounds like a co-op, like a cop-out. It sounds like settling. It sounds like exactly the kind of manufactured helplessness I've been warning you about. But here's the difference. Eventually, with action is hope. Eventually, without action is just waiting, sadly, to die. Look at what we've actually accomplished when we refuse to give up. In 2002, we ended a dictatorship through the ballot box. First time in Kenya. In 2010, we passed a new constitution that devolved power. The establishment fought it, but we won. In 2017, we forced a Supreme Court to nullify a presidential election. First time in African history. In 2024, we made a government withdraw a finance bill in real time. First time ever. Each one of those was impossible until it wasn't. And each one happened because people refused to believe in the government's inevitability. But here is what nobody tells you about those victories. Exhausting and temporary and mostly insufficient. We nullified the election in 2017, but Uhuru still won the repeat. We passed a new constitution in 2010, but it hasn't stopped the looting. We ended Moi's rule in 2002, but we replaced him with Kenyatta's son and now Moi's political heir. So, all losing. We're doing both. Simultaneously even. We're winning the long war while losing the short battles. Or maybe we are losing the long war while winning the short battles. I don't even know anymore. Maybe those categories don't even make sense at all. What I do know, the government wants you paralyzed by that ambiguity. They want you so uncertain about whether the efforts matter that you stop making the efforts completely. But uncertainty isn't the same as futility. You do not have to know if you're winning to know that not fighting, definitely losing. You do not have to see the finish line to know which direction to walk. You do not have to believe the system will fall tomorrow to refuse to be complicit in its survival today. The conspiracy is that they've made power look something that happens in State House, in Parliament, in the Supreme Court. Something distant, something inaccessible, something that requires violence or wealth or connections to challenge. But power is also what happens when you teach your children to question authority instead of worshipping it. Is what happens when you refuse to participate in tribal politics even when your own community pressures you or your own family requires of you. Power is what happens when you document the lies so thoroughly that gaslighting becomes impossible. Power is what happens when you build something that doesn't require the government's permission to exist. They've spent 60 odd years teaching us that power flows downwards, from the state to the people. But that's backwards. Power flows upwards. We grant it to them and we can withdraw it from them. At once, though. Not dramatically, but steadily, relentlessly. One small act of refusal at a time. So, let me tell you what I actually believe. Stripped of all the rhetoric and the anger and the analysis, I believe the is not superior to the will of the Kenyan people. But I also believe that that will has to be organized, it has to be sustained, and it has to be strategic. I believe we have the ability to bring political change. I also believe that that change will look different than we look or imagine. The dramatic revolution, it won't be it won't be that dramatic revolution. It will be 1,000 small shifts that accumulate into something completely undeniable. I believe we can be unshackled from the, but I also believe we are the ones who have to do the unshackling. No international community will save us. No opposition politician will free us. No institution will come and protect us. Just us. Just you, me, Kenyans, ordinary, tired, struggling, Kenyans. You know what keeps me going? It's not optimism. I am not optimistic about Kenyan politics. How could I be? What keeps me going is stubbornness. The same stubbornness that a Kenyan hustler opened a kibanda after the county government demolished it 5 times. The same stubbornness that makes parents pay school fees they can't afford because they refuse to let their children's potential die. The same stubbornness that makes activists keep organizing even after colleagues have been killed or abducted. The same stubbornness that keeps and makes journalists keep investigating even when the state tries to criminalize journalism. The same stubbornness that brought people back to the streets for Gen Z protests even after the abductions, even after the unfortunate deaths. That's not hope. You know, hope is passive. Hope is waiting for things to get better. This is something different. This is refusing to let them win, even when you're not sure you can even beat them. So here's my challenge to you, because I refuse to end this on some vague inspirational nothing. Pick one thing, just one. One thing you can do consistently that undermines the conspiracy of helplessness. Maybe it's documenting every broken campaign promise in a spreadsheet. Maybe it's teaching one young person per month about the constitutional. Maybe it's refusing to pay bribes even when it's inconvenient. Or maybe it's supporting independent media instead of consuming state-sponsored propaganda. Maybe it's attending your county assembly meetings and actually participating in devolved. Maybe it's just having honest conversations with your family about corruption instead of defending our tribe's turn to it. So pick one thing, do it consistently. Do not wait for the revolution. Be the revolution, even if it's a small one. Here's the final conspiracy I want to reveal. They are counting on you to do nothing. They've calculated that you're too tired, too busy, too cynical, too scared to even act. And maybe they are right about most people. Maybe most people will do nothing. But you, who's listening to me, you're not most. This entire video, you cared enough to get this far. That already makes you different. The question is, what are you going to do with that difference? I don't know if we're going to win. If Kenya will look different in 10 years, 20 years, or even 50 years. What I know is that I'd rather die trying than live collaborating. I'd rather be exhausted from resistance than comfortable in submission. I'd rather be failing or fail fighting than succeed. And if you feel the same way, even if it's a little bit, then we're already more powerful than they want us to believe. The conspiracy is that they are inevitable. The truth is that they're just persistent. So let's be more persistent. Let's outlast them. The cost of tyranny too expensive for them to actually afford it. Not through violence, not through chaos, but through relentless, undramatic, unglamorous, uncompromising consistency. They think we'll get tired, and they're probably right. Isn't whether we will get tired. The question is whether we will quit. I'm not quitting. Are you? One more thing before you go. If you're watching this and you work for the government, and I know some of you are, I see the analytics. I want to say something directly to you. I know you didn't get into public service to be part of a corrupt system. I know most of you are just trying to survive, trying to feed your families, trying to do your job in an impossible environment. And I know the same system that oppresses the ordinary Kenyans also oppresses you. Maybe different mechanisms, maybe different, but oppression nonetheless. You're not my enemy. The system is. But here's the thing. The system needs you to function. It needs your compliance, your silence, your participation. And I'm asking you, not as a critic, not as an antagonist, fellow Kenyan, to consider what small act of resistance you can manage from inside. Maybe it's refusing to process an illegal directive. Maybe it's leaking information to the public for something that they deserve to know. Maybe it's just doing your job with integrity even when everyone around isn't. Maybe it's quietly helping a journalist or activist or organization that are trying to hold the system accountable. You have more power than you actually think. And using that power doesn't require martyrdom. It requires moments, minute or not, moments. And to everyone else, if you've made it this far, you owe it to yourself to act on something you've learned. Do not let this just be content you consumed. Let it be a catalyst. Document, organize, and persist. Those three words, that's the whole strategy. The new year. Receipts of our vibes, always. And now let's go to work. And happy new year. And a blessed 2026. A year of resistance, defiance, persistency. Barakatele, have yourselves a lovely, lovely day.